technology was always a cost center. It was never integral to the decision-making process. And I think the concept of a CTO, Chief Technology Officer, or anybody along those lines, Chief Information Officer, CIO, were largely non-existent. Now, I think the smarter organizations are saying, I have all this data, and I'm still making process-based decisions, meaning I make that decision today because I'm following the same process I did yesterday. The smarter decision maker is going to the IT department and saying, I'm going to get you out of the bowels of a cost center and move you into the strategic decision-making process. And can we make better and more informed data-driven decisions? And I think that trend is starting and continuing. Some organizations are much more along the lines of that continuum than others. But we are long data. There's a tremendous amount of it out there. It's measured in zettabytes, which I think
it's crazy.
10 to the maybe the 28th power. You could probably correct me on that. So it's a massive number. And most of it has come into existence just in the last 15 years as a result of the iPhone. And every like, every tweet, somebody's got a digital footprint to this and is being recorded and weaponized and used to make decisions. So I see that evolution continuing, and I think it's going to be a problem solver, I believe, for democratization to a large degree. And I've heard, and maybe you've heard this as well, Greg, that distributed ledger or blockchain is a solution in search of a problem, and that may or may not be true. But I look at Bitcoin as an example, and with the approval of the SEC for these ETFs, we're seeing more and more movement in that space. But love or hate Bitcoin, it cannot be a trillion-dollar asset class without blockchain. The ability to have an immutable ledger that's open 24/7 was an integral part of the success of the growth of that.
Absolutely. It's the backbone.
No doubt. And if I then apply that to what is today and tomorrow's stock certificate, which is going to be a non-fungible token, that's my stock certificate.
Right.
And if that can trade immutably on a ledger, then I think we're on to something. Might have to be permissioned as opposed to permissionless. We can get into what that means in a moment. But maybe a proof statement, and one for you and I and maybe listeners to look at, is that we've seen this a little bit, but Hamilton Lane is a recent example. They came out with a secondaries fund just within the last couple of weeks. I think it's about a $5 billion raise, slightly oversubscribed, which some of these funds still are today. And if you want to come in as an institutional investor, the minimum investment, I believe, is $5 million. I don't know about your family balance sheet, maybe a little bit rich for mine, but if they have a feeder fund on the blockchain. And in the feeder fund on the blockchain, you could get in for $20,000 versus $5 million. So I think it's democratizing access, and the GP is able to look at this as one ticket, one investor, as opposed to a series of 20,000 adding up to 5 million, which is the last thing the GP wants or needs in terms of their infrastructure.
Right. Wow. That's really cool to hear. And the way that the blockchain's being utilized in that aspect, I think that's really neat.
Yeah, early days, but maybe just one last thing in that too. And this I would love to see happen. We've had these news stories about S-REIT and B-REIT gating because they're interval funds, and you hit 5% a quarter or 20% a year, it's game over, and the fund has to at least temporarily shut down. I'm thinking on the blockchain, if there was a price referee who helped with discovery and you wanted in and I wanted out, somebody would have to have the matching. And if we like the price, the deal happens. If we don't, we don't. But the fund itself does not have to raise any liquidity, which I think is awesome for the investor that bought into the value proposition, that doesn't want any liquidity happening around them, because the moment that happens, I've got a value leak out the window.
Well, I mean, and that's part of the why we're buying some of these alternatives. It's not like we want extra cash. There's this idea of, why am I buying this? What's the purpose of this asset? Where does it get me? How does it fit with my family goals, values down the line?